Awesome. Well, Mike, welcome, dude. Really glad you're here. And it was kind of timely. I was thinking about this. I was reading today, just coming out of the gates. Okay. I was reading today about the political unrest in South America.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. It's a
and I'm
big deal.
like, I don't really know much about what's really taking place, but I do know somebody who does.
Yeah.
Because Peru and Brazil,
Yeah.
I was looking at populations. Brazil is obviously the highest, but Peru, I think, is like maybe the fourth highest
right
population.
behind it. Yeah.
And then I was with that was predicated by being with a missionary yesterday who just got back from Brazil. I was praying for her. She's a medical missionary there, and I was with a group of them. But she had just gotten back, and she said it was a safe trip. Everything was good.
Yeah.
What's going on out there?
Yeah. It's just political stuff. It's Brazil. They had presidential election contested, the usual deal.
Bolsonaro and Lula.
Yeah. And they say
I don't
it
really
was,
understand it,
it was a mess. And so they're protesting there. In Peru, they actually impeached the president and then imprisoned him. And so there's protests all over the country. They're burning
He was trying
stuff.
to eliminate their cabinet, right?
He did. He literally came out one day and he said, at 3:00, I'm disbanding Congress and I'm going to rule by presidential edict only.
Oh, wow. So he wanted to be a dictator, essentially?
He did, yeah. And so right before that, Congress got together and impeached him and then imprisoned him.
Oh, wow.
So, it's fantastic. Yeah, great stuff going on there.
That is so...
And so there have been protests all over the country.
Yeah. So all over Peru?
All over Peru, yeah.
Okay. So people actually want him to do that?
No, it's more the platform that he ran on. And so he had a lot of ties to Venezuela, countries like that. And he very much appealed to kind of the poorer, lower class, saying, man, we're going to give you free housing. We're going to give you all of this stuff. And they were really into that because no one's really cared for them in the past. And no one's really been a champion for those people. And that's what he came in on. Except he wasn't exactly doing that. He never followed through on a lot of those promises. And then he started going back on some of it, and it just became a whole mess. So really their protest is, this is what we wanted, and it's not been given to us. So they don't actually care about him. They don't actually want him back. When he was impeached, then the vice president was put into office. They didn't follow through on any of it. So now they're just kind of generally protesting. And now they want an entirely new election altogether. They want Congress out, they want the presidents out, and they want a whole new election.
Who's they?
The people.
The people.
The people that are protesting. Yeah, that's what they're protesting
How
for.
is their government set up to handle that? Like, is that in their constitution?
I mean, they could, but what would have to happen is the military would have to follow through. So it happened once. There was a president named Fujimori.
Okay.
He's actually in prison for the rest of his life.
Whoa.
But he actually got the military to physically blockade Congress and stop them from meeting. And then they had, it was
How long ago was that?
This was a while ago. Like, this is when we were kids. So it's been a while since it happened.
Okay. So it's the same thing, but different era altogether.
Same
And then
thing,
you weren't
different.
there at all.
No, I wasn't
You didn't
there
have
at all.
any context for Peru then.
No. So at least right now, the military is keeping everything as calm as they can. Congress is going on as usual. The vice president is now ruling as the president. And they have no plans to give in to any of that as of right now.
Okay. So the vice president isn't carrying forward the president's plans.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
honestly,
Congress.
not much has changed at all since the presidential election. No major rulings have come down. Nothing much has been done to further what they promised they would do.
Is it structured similarly to the United States?
It is, yeah. They have president, vice president. They have a Congress. It's all elected. So, on the surface, it's all very much like the United States is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there like allegations of corruption and different things that like we're having here? Like I'm
absolutely.
like reading about Brazil and I'm watching the same. It's like
it's
mirroring what took place.
It's the same playbook, right? This person got elected. Well, that person, they bought votes or the votes were illegal, and it's exactly the same playbook as here. Yeah.
Are we just noticing that because we're older, or is that something that just continues to? It's just happening now.
I think it's just happening now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is Venezuela blamed down there too?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But it was all started. This took place in Venezuela because I have a friend.
Right.
Venezuelan bookstore. I mean, it's not a Venezuelan bookstore, but our friends who are Venezuelan run the bookstore.
They run the bookstore.
Yeah. They moved to Ambridge from Venezuela because of all the political unrest, and they were business owners down there. They had a bookstore down there. It was successful, but then it was going to fall apart.
Right.
Right.
There's actually huge throughout Peru, there are Venezuelan refugees that have come in masses. They're all fleeing the country, trying to get out of that still. I mean, it's still an ongoing problem. And there's still Venezuelan refugees all throughout South America there.
Oh, wow. Wow. I remember going to, there's a street called Venezuela, I believe. Samuel and I went, and I was like, I want to go there and be an absolute minority. I don't know if anybody else can speak English here. So I went with Samuel. And at that time, like, his English has gotten so much better. At that time, his English was not very good. So we were trying. And then I'm like, Samuel, I'm going to step outside for a few minutes. And I walked down the block. And it was just like an eerie feeling for me to be like, nobody knew me. I didn't know anybody. I couldn't communicate with anybody.
Right. Yeah.
I needed to feel that.
Yeah. You can't communicate. Like, you truly are alone. And man, if you need help, if you need something, you're out of luck.
Yeah. And I remember, did you tell me that a lot of Venezuelan refugees were going to that area in particular?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And they've gone there, and Peru was one of the countries that really opened their borders to them, to allow them to come in. And it was kind of taken in mixed ways. Some people were open to that. Some people were like, hey, they need help. But then a lot of areas were like, man, like, we're overrun by Venezuelan refugees. Like, we have to put a cap on this somehow. So it's been accepted with mixed reviews.
Okay. So you were saying how, I was just thinking about like the promises of, we're going to help you get housing and all of that stuff. I mean, the tie-in to what is in your heart too. Like, you're like, nobody's a champion. Well, I'm like, hey, they just don't know Mike Rebich yet.
I'm just not at that political level yet there. Yeah. Like, I've tried to get Melissa, our missionary there, I've tried to get her to get me to meet the president, but we haven't been successful yet. So maybe next time. We're still working on it. Yeah, we're still working on it.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we go there. What's that place that we went to? What's their White House essentially called?
The Presidential Palace. The
Presidential Palace.
Yeah.
And you have guys with AK-47 standing outside.
Oh, yeah,
and they're so kind. Like, my son went up to him and was like, can we take a picture? And he's like, can you take a picture?
Yeah, they are. They're kind. And I mean, it's super touristy in that area. I mean, it's much like our White House now. Like, you can't get inside. Like, you try to get inside of those gates where the guys with the machine guns are.
I don't want to test it.
Yeah, like, they get serious. But as long as you obey the rules, they're very kind.
Yeah. So what's going on? What's the landscape in South America or even in Peru right now for missions?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, COVID was pretty tough for that. As tough as the restrictions were here, with lockdowns and all of that stuff, it was even tougher there. If you just simply Google, how countries were affected by COVID and death rates, Peru was one of the highest as far as death rates and people that were affected. And I mean, they had super strong lockdowns to the point where they had curfews at night. And especially there in Lima, the city is divided by districts. So like, think of our counties, and you weren't allowed to cross over into the next district.
No.
Like, you had to stay in your district. There was curfews at night.
What if you worked in another district? They just shut everything down?
Everything was shut down.
Okay.
Pharmacies were allowed to stay open, and grocery stores and banks. And outside of that, nothing was open.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't cross districts. At night when curfew happened, the military would literally just push through the areas. And if you were out, you were forced to go home. And if you didn't, they would arrest you.
Wow.
That was it. That was your choices.
Yeah.
And so, it was tough for missionaries. I mean, it was tough to be there. Obviously ministering was pretty well down to, we helped with food distribution. Obviously that was an issue, people trying to get food, trying to stay alive, getting medicine to people that needed it. But then also on the side of fundraising, because, those missionaries, their support comes from the United States or from the country that they came from. So even just trying to be able to stay there was difficult.
Yeah.
Trying to leave was almost impossible because most of those countries in South America, they closed the borders. So if you happened to be there when COVID started, there was some missionaries that we knew that were there. They were trying to get back to the States, and they had to work with the embassy there and with the U.S. government to get specially chartered flights that were allowed to come into Peru, land at the airport, allow them to board, and then allow them to leave.
Wow. So and then they probably had to quarantine for 10 days.
Exactly.
Or 14 days, whatever it was.
Yeah, once they got back. So it was really tough during those years. And then especially
imagine getting a private chartered plane out of Peru, how difficult that would be.
Right. And you had to do it through the government. So it's not even like you were just paying a company
Always
to do
so.
it. You had
Yeah.
to go through the government to get that to allow you to be out.
Yeah, we got a couple things on our mind right now. So
right.
yeah, we'll get to it eventually.
We'll get to your plane to Peru.
Where do they stay in the meantime? They had housing probably.
They just had to stay. Yeah. I mean, obviously if you had the money, you could stay in a hotel if you were there temporarily. But I mean, they were allowed to stay in their houses, but they were trying to get back to the States. And just trying to organize all that and put all together was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So you come out of all of that. And then especially in Peru, you come out of all that, you're hoping, everything's coming back. In fact, just November of last year, they rolled back some of the last of their COVID restrictions. So I was there last July, and it was still, you had to be double masked in most areas. You either had to have a vaccination card or a proof of a negative test, even just to get into the country.
Yeah.
So it was just a few months ago, they rolled back a lot of the last of those restrictions and felt that it was safe enough to do that.
I bet you can't wait to get back there.
Yeah, I'm ready to go back.
When are you going?
I don't know. Soon. We're working on that. We're working on, when we can do trips there. And after those last restrictions rolled back, we really felt like it was safe and well to take general people back in and put teams back together and take them back. So.
Yeah. And okay, so there you mentioned how they their death rate was very high.
Yeah.
That probably has to do with the medicine down there, the care, or were there different variants that
it's a mixture of things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've been there before. So, the housing situation there, you oftentimes have multiple generations living together.
Oh, yeah.
So, you have grandparents, kids, grandkids. So everyone all living together. And then there's just a simple stat that I believe it's 70% of people don't have a refrigerator. So here in the States, we can go out, we can go shopping, and we can get stuff for weeks. We can literally stay in our houses for weeks and put stuff in the freezer and refrigerator. We're good to go. That just doesn't exist there. So literally every couple of days, they're forced to go out and go to the market and to get things that they need to survive.
Okay.
So you have multiple generations living together. You have literally impossible to quarantine for more than a few days at a time before you have to go back out again.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have the availability of medicines. Even oxygen was a problem. They literally could not produce enough pure oxygen in the country to give to people that were having trouble breathing.
Wow.
So it was just a culmination of a bunch of things all led to that happening.
Was it difficult in both Tinga Maria, where you have a lot of friends and a larger network, I would assume, because we were there.
Yeah.
Was it difficult in Tinga Maria the same as Lima, or was it easier in Tinga Maria because it's not highly populated?
Yeah. I mean, it still hit them hard.
Yeah.
But those areas of lower population were able to get away a little bit easier, because you just don't have as many people. I mean, Lima, you have 12 to 13 million people as best they can count. So one of the largest cities in all of the Americas.
Is that the size of New York?
Bigger than New York.
It's bigger than New York?
Yeah, New York,
Maybe
don't
11?
quote me on this, I think is 8 or
it's
9 million.
Wow,
yeah, so significantly larger than New York.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, just mass amounts of people, and it's just a kind of a perfect storm for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So get opening back up. And did you see a lot of missionaries? They came home. Did you see a lot of missionaries not go back from the States?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have statistics for this, but just from my experience, there has not been the surge of returning missionaries that left during COVID.
Are they feeling that?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're saying your experience, so it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
But how do you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, even just talking to churches locally, working with them in missions and saying, what's happening in the world, where you are. And even a lot of those churches are saying, a lot of those missionary relationships that we had before COVID, they're just not there anymore, and they're not returning, or they're not going back to doing what they're doing. And there's just seemingly a real felt void right now in areas like that. And not just Peru. I mean, that's just one country. That's just where we know the most, you know, but just generally speaking, those churches are saying, man, there's a real void of missionary partners that we had before that just aren't there anymore.
How important is that to those guys? That the U.S. is sending missionaries. You read the books like When Helping Hurts. I'm sure that it's complex.
It is, yeah, because
we can do this on our own, but we also need outside support.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the greatest phrase that I've ever heard in relation to how to treat missions and how to do that when we go to other countries is like, we're not there to give a hand out, we're there to give a hand up. Mm-hmm. And it's that idea of partnering with local believers, with local churches, and not coming in and being like, hey guys, like we have this all figured out.
Right.
Follow exactly what we do and you're going to be fine. Like that's not the answer at all, I don't think.
Yeah.
Especially you talk about, different cultures and different people. Like I truly believe that no one can reach, like staying in our Peru context, no one can reach Peruvian people like a Peruvian pastor can. I mean, he's been raised in that culture. They know the culture. They have the connection to the people. So I don't think us as Americans going in and taking over is the answer. Right. I think it's going in and supporting them, you know, and saying, hey, we're here to come alongside of you. We're here to help you, and we're here to make you be successful.
Right. Isn't that local missions as well? You know, I had a conversation with a magistrate just recently, and I've been connecting with those guys, but we had the same conversation. It's like, hey, I just want to kind of partner with the people who are doing things right, and see what support we can give, not be the pastor who's like, yeah, our church is going to come in and solve all these issues.
Exactly.
I mean, we would love that. We would love to come in and solve the issues, but the truth is, like, I had a guy come to the church the other day, and he was trying to give me all this information without any kind of relationship. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know you. Hi, my name is Zach. What's your name? Like, doesn't work that way, man. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like you always say, like, you can't have buy-in without weigh-in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, for a perfect example, like our friend Pastor Bobby in Beaver Falls. I mean, you and I could go to Beaver Falls. Like, nobody knows us there. Right. Like, we look very different than the people of Beaver Falls. Yeah. We probably would not be well accepted there. But like our friend Pastor Bobby, like he is. Like he grew up in Beaver Falls, graduated from there. He now ministers there. Why would we not just support him and what he is doing to reach the people there? Like it just makes sense, instead of us going in and being like, hey, our church, we got all the answers. We know how to do this. Just let us take over. Why would we not just support the locals? And that, like you said, like that's for local missions, foreign missions, however it is. I just believe that that's the right answer there.
Yeah. What about like around the world, apart from Lima, apart from even just locally? I would imagine I'm seeing a lot of younger people drawn to missions right now. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing, I'm just thinking of a couple people in my head, and man, it just seems like younger people, and they're really going in, trying to plant churches right now, doing the best they can to learn culture and integrate into culture. Is that in the younger generation? Are you noticing that in the younger generation? They're more inspired to missions, or is that like just a kind of a normal thing? Have the older generation, have they stopped? Have they pulled back a little bit because it's become a little bit more difficult to get into those countries?
I mean, I think it's just the natural ebb and flow of it. And yeah, I mean, I think that this younger generation, like, they're really drawn to service, and, they really have that excitement of going and serving. And I mean, if you look at the world now, like the world gets smaller every day, right? Like it's so easy to get to places anymore. And I mean, it's not like, you have to go jump on a boat and, travel 3 weeks on a boat to get somewhere. I mean, you can go online, buy a ticket, and you're there. So I think it's the natural ebb and flow, but I think it is the younger generation that really does get excited about that. And I think that's something that we as the church need to foster, that excitement of missions, that excitement of going and serving and being, I think is a real thing. And so I think we just have to make sure that we're teaching them properly and that we're putting them in situations to succeed. Yeah. And not that in a few years they're burned out. Man, I haven't seen any success. Nothing's happened. I think we need to set them up to be successful in that.
Yeah. Have you seen burnout in missionaries through the years?
Oh, 100%. I mean, even, again, going to Peru because that's where we have the most relations, where we've worked the most. But yeah, I mean, especially when someone like that's passionate is tied to an organization that doesn't support them well. And man, they just go over there. They're there for years on end with no support, no relation, just kind of left out on their own.
Kind of floating.
Yeah, just kind of floating. And in the end, they just say, man, like, is this really worth it for me, for my family? And they end up coming back.
So when you say they're kind of floating and, they're kind of on their own, they're not having relationships with people within the community, or if that's only their relationship? Like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like both of those. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that as a sending organization, I think you have a responsibility to support them as best you can, financially, spiritually, communication, all of that. But I think also it's important for them to have relationship there in the country as well. And as a sending organization, I think you have to make sure of that. Are you forming those relationships? Are you not just out there on your own? Are you doing that? So I think it's a complex thing. I mean, I don't think it's as easy as, hey, I want to be a missionary. I'm going to go. See you later.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot involved with it to make sure that it is an ongoing thing, to make sure that this isn't just a few years of excitement being there. I don't know if this is working. Maybe I wasn't called. Maybe I heard wrong. I'm just going to come back. I think we need to do better at setting that up to be successful in that.
Right. What's like you have Lima in your heart. You have Peru in your heart. Is that primarily for you? When did that start?
So in 2007, I went to Peru for the first time. So I was doing construction. I was able to go and be a part of building a children's home in Tingo Maria. You've been there. And so, man, I just went there.
Precious place, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
In the Amazon jungle, gorgeous. And so, man, I went there and honestly, I just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the country and the people. And we've just kind of never left.
I think when I went there, I realized Americans are welcoming. I mean, I will say, those from the United States are welcoming, but not very hospitable. And I didn't realize that until I was in that culture, and to see the hospitability, I think. Hospitality. That's the word.
Oh, there we go.
I always make up new words.
I got
It's just like my new thing.
Yeah, you mavericked through it.
Yeah, thanks, bud. Appreciate it. Yeah, like I've just realized how hospitable that culture is. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's, you've noticed that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much still like, I mean, if you think back to the United States, back in 40s and 50s, and where everyone walked to places in the community.
It feels just like that.
It feels just like that, right?
Yeah.
Like you go there and it's funny because if you do drive around, you see the same stores over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But then you realize it's because they don't travel, miles away to go to a store. They stay there in their community.
Yeah.
They walk to everything. They walk to the stores. That's why local churches are so important there, because, you plant a church in a community and that's where they'll go. They'll walk to that church. They'll be at that church. And so it's very much that, man. They're very open.
Are there mega churches in Lima?
Yes, there are. It's becoming a thing.
Okay. So they're starting to move a little bit, but the culture's behind.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the culture, I say it's behind. Is it really behind?
Is it really behind? That they're ahead, right?
I mean, like that's
So, like,
assuming
we need
we're
to get
better.
better. Right.
Do we need to, do they need to go forward or do we need to go back?
Yeah.
Like, which way is it?
Are they following us as a model? I guess that's a better way to put it. Like, are they saying, we want to be like the United States?
I hope not. In some ways, I hope not.
And I know exactly how you feel.
And you know what I mean? Because when you go there, like, man, it's nothing for them to welcome you into their house and to be like, hey, I need to run to the store. And it's not like I got to go get in a car and I'll be there back in 45 minutes. It's like, hey, I'm just going to walk down the street. You know?
Did you see that Sebastian Maniscalco bit on what it was like to ring the doorbell in the 80s and then what it is now? It's hilarious.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like my dad was
get the Entenmann's.
My dad was a door-to-door salesman. Yeah. Right. Like
I was just in the area.
Yeah. Like what do you do now? Like when you see someone, like you look on your Ring door cam and you're like, oh shoot, someone's coming to the door.
And
like,
hide. Yeah.
Yeah. Do I know who that is? Don't answer the door. Like turn all the lights off.
Yeah. That's exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah. That's exactly.
In that culture, you go there and it's like, come on in.
Yes.
I don't even know how to say that.
Yeah. Like they're welcome. Like please come in. Like they want you to be there. They want to spend time with you. They want you to know their community, to be a part of that. And like, it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
I love being there and I love being a part of that.
Just don't drink the water.
Just don't drink the water. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So there are mega churches there? And
There are.
Getting there?
Yeah, it's becoming a thing. It's becoming a thing, but only in certain areas. Because if you think about it, to be able to go to a mega church, like you have to either have a car or you have to be willing to pay public transportation to go there. So even though those exist, it's still not available to everyone. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Lima's massive, right? Like 12, 13 million people. And of course, like in those countries, in developing countries, they don't build up as much, right? So you go to New York, I mean, you have massive apartment buildings. I mean, they just don't do that. So naturally, the cities expand out. And so a lot of those outlying communities, it's still very much like there has to be a local church. There has to be, and when I say local, like within walking distance, or, maybe just a short little cab ride away, not a half an hour or not 45 minutes away. Like they're just not going to go to that.
Yeah. Yeah. In in the outskirts, do they have the technology to continue to resource like you and I, if we have to preach a sermon or get to preach a sermon somewhere,
right?
I can look up 5 different sermons on the same topic.
Right.
So
this is interesting. And I learned this in my travels to Peru. They actually had cell phone technology before we did. So in the development of the country, they found that it was cheaper and easier to put up cell phone towers than to try to run cabling for landline telephones. And so, this is from missionaries that would go like in the 80s and the 90s. You could get a cell phone there easily when here in the States, we were still using landlines. Like it was still very much being developed. So what's happened is they had that cell phone technology. And so you can't, like the technology is there. The issue is cost, right? So like you and I mean, we can go anywhere like here in HQ at, even at Carlinton, wherever we are, like there's Wi-Fi available, right? And we can jump on, we can use those resources and get a hold of them. That's not always the case there. Like to find free Wi-Fi in Peru, you're like, I don't know, is there like a Starbucks, 2 hours away? Or, where can we go to do that? So the technology is there, but it's not always accessible.
Okay.
So for a lot of those outlying churches, like when we would go and do pastors' conferences or teaching conferences, they were like, can you print stuff and bring it to us?
Okay.
Like they very much wanted books. They wanted paper that they could write on, that they could study from. That's very much still how they operate in a lot of those areas.
Wow. So are you planning any of that?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
We have opportunities. Obviously, COVID, I mean, nothing was going on with that. But we definitely have those opportunities. And I think it's just finding pastors that are willing to say like, man, I'll give up a week and I'll go,
I'm in,
off to a country somewhere and, be willing to teach pastors that don't have those opportunities I do.
Yeah. Well, it's recorded. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready.
I'm in. Yeah, man. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world as you visit, and you're doing a great work there. How's Mission Comida down there?
Yeah, it's good.
And Comida means what? Food?
Yeah,
right?
Mission Food. We actually haven't announced that yet, so here we go. It's out there.
That.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the idea, right?
Well, we can cut it if you want.
No, it's good. No, let's go. Let's launch it. So, a lot of those outlying areas.
Yeah.
So quickly, the idea is a lot of the structures that people live in, like they don't even have a kitchen, or they don't even have
70% don't have a refrigerator.
70% don't even have a refrigerator.
That's
right?
insane. I never knew that.
And so what they do is in those small communities, this is hyper community focused. They call it a community kitchen.
Yeah.
So it's typically a group of ladies. They'll cook a meal for the day. People will walk to that community kitchen. They'll pay like 30, 60 cents, and that's their meal for the day. And then those ladies will take that food. They'll go buy what they can from the market, and then they just do that day after day.
Oh, wow.
So we got involved over COVID. A pastor that we know there works with some of those kitchens, and he said, man, people don't even have the 30 to 60 cents right now. Would you help just source food? Would you just help us buy food to be able to take to the kitchens so that they have food to make? And so as we did it, and I was talking to our missionaries there, Samuel and Melissa, we began to talk about this idea. And I was like, man, this is a fantastic outreach idea. Because these kitchens, like they have the heart of the community.
Yeah,
it's a natural gathering place.
Right.
People are going there every day for food. And so that's our plan, is to partner with these kitchens, and we're going to help them on a physical level. I mean, some of them don't even have stoves. Like, they're literally inside of a building with an open fire cooking food.
Yeah.
Right. So you
Can
go
you
in
imagine
there
that?
and
You're
it's terrible.
in a city with a population 12 million.
Yeah.
Like you just said. and they're cooking on an open fire.
Yeah. Like it's literally, they just have wood burning and they have some sort of a grate over and they have a pot over it.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, sometimes we're kind of soft as Americans. And
Right.
like I walk in there and it's just like smoky and
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't even be in here for like a minute. And
yeah.
there's ladies in there day in and day out cooking. So we're going to partner with them on a physical level, like get them stoves.
Yeah.
Like they don't even have sinks. Like they have like a Rubbermaid container. You would love this. They have a Rubbermaid container that they fill up with water at the beginning of the day, and they would just wash the dishes in there like day out. You know,
Oh, yeah.
like you eat. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to.
I'll take my own plate.
Slosh the
Thanks.
water around on it and give it to the next.
No.
So like a sink with running water, and like they want that. I mean, they want to do better. They want to be able to cook better. They want to be more sanitary. Like they just don't have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
So we're going to partner with them on that level. Help them make sure they have food, and then we'll bring the gospel in on the back of that. So we'll bring missions teams in to be able to work in those communities where we can do, kids ministry, VBS with them, do evangelistic outreaches. The ultimate goal to be to plant a church in those communities and be able to hand off kind of the care of that kitchen to the local church, and then all of our focus goes through the local church.
Right. And you see that is so biblical.
Yeah.
So biblical.
Yeah, I think so.
The feeding of the 5,000.
Exactly, right. If you look at the life and ministry of Jesus, like he didn't just go around and only preach. Like he always took care of people physically.
Yeah.
Whether he was feeding them, whether he was, if they had infirmities and he was healing them, whatever it was, he always took care of them physically. And then he would tell them about his Father.
Right. It opened up the heart.
It does. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very real teaching of that. Like I learned this when I was in Haiti. Like if a man is starving to death or if a man can't feed his family, like he doesn't really care what you have to say. You can go and tell him about Jesus, but if a person is in such dire need physically, like they really don't care about that. And so, but if you go in and you show them that you care, right? If you show them, and I care about you as a person, ultimately it becomes a natural question. Like, why? Like, why do you even care about me? You know, like you could be at home, in what they know of the United States, you could be living there. Why are you here? Why do you even care about me? Mm-hmm. So it just naturally opens the door to begin to share the gospel with people.
Wow. That's good, man.
Yeah.
Think about the book of Acts. They had food distribution. Very clearly it's all set up there. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the feeding of the 5,000, right? The disciples were like, Jesus, like, let's just send these people away. Like they're hungry. Like, let's let them go figure it out on their own. And he was like, no, like, we're not doing that. Like, we're going to feed them. We're going to take care of them. And he very purposefully did that.
Yeah. That's good, man. That's really good. You were talking about their context of the United States.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's funny when we would go to the children's home in Tingo Maria there, and we would, hang out with the kids, and they would be like, so the Jonas Brothers, right? And I'd be like
personally?
Oh yeah, like their whole view of the United States is what they watch on TV. Yeah. So and I'm like I don't really know the Jonas Brothers yet, or like the little girls, they'd be like, Hannah Montana, like what's she like? I don't know.
She's like in the city that we're in. Yeah. Oh, their world is so small.
Their view of the United States is, and of course now as the internet expands, right? But again, all of their knowledge of that. I mean, it would be like someone who's never been to Peru. Like, what do you know about Peru? Right. Well, a lot of people might know Machu Picchu. Like, it's one of the wonders of the world.
Yeah. Well, we do. Yeah, we do the same thing.
We do the same thing.
I have a friend down there in the city.
Right. Or we'll Google it.
Right.
Peru, and like you're just skimming through headlines, or maybe you've seen a documentary about it. So, their view of the United States is very much just what they see on TV or what they see on the internet.
Yeah. And that's not just your broken Spanish.
No, that's no. I mean, it's half and half Spanish.
I'll never forget when there was an indigenous woman, and what was she? What area was she from? She was in Tingo.
Yeah, they speak Quechua.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't remember who interpreted it at that point.
So that's super interesting. So
she kept asking me if I was Italian. And I'm like, how do you even know that?
Yeah. Which clearly you're Greek. I don't even know why.
I don't know how she got that mixed up.
I was like, it's languages. It must be super lost in translation. But it's interesting. So we've actually been in situations where you have those different languages even in Spanish. So Quechua is a big one. They will say that that's like the original language of the Peruvians before the conquistadors came.
Okay.
So you'll actually have like, so as we're speaking English, you'll have someone that will translate that into Spanish. And then you have to have another translator that can take the Spanish translation and then translate it into Quechua.
Okay.
So it's super awkward because like you'll say a sentence and then that sentence is translated and then that sentence is translated again.
Yeah.
So it's literally going through multiple forms of translation.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
It's really hard. Like it's really hard to keep a thought going or, we were doing it in the context of like a pastoral training. And so like you're trying to teach principles, but every time you say something, you're having to stop for like 10 or 15 seconds while it's being translated multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the people who speak Quechua, I mean, what did Peruvians call them? They're Peruvians.
They are still Peruvians, but it's I mean, they're still Peruvian. But
do they say indigenous Peruvian or?
Yeah, you can say that. You can say indigenous people, indigenous Peruvians.
They guard their bloodline, right? I remember you saying something about like.
Yeah, so there are. It's interesting because there's different ones. There's another tribe that we would work with called the Shipibo tribe.
Shipibo, okay, I remember
that. That was kind of their claim to fame was that their bloodline had no Spanish influence into it.
Okay.
So it's the same idea. Now they're more like in the jungle areas, but they claimed that they're like literally pure Peruvians. Yeah. And like if you remember, like they actually look a little bit different,
right?
Because once the conquistadors came, right, then you had the whole Spanish influence that came in and affected the bloodline, the culture, everything.
Yes.
So they hold that they are pure Peruvians.
Now, Mike, you told me about the spirituality of the Peruvian people prior to the conquistadors coming in and then after and how that shifted. So like what was they were worshiping what the sun
yeah they had so you can go to cities like Cusco, which is it's believed pretty well known that it was a center of the Peruvian Empire then. And so they studied they worshipped like the sun, the moon, the stars. It was things that they could see and could worship.
Right.
And then when the conquistadors came in, they brought the Catholic religion with them. And so it's interesting because as you go through the city, there's like Catholic churches in odd places, right? It's not, you would say like, okay, here's the city, there's naturally a church there. It's kind of like random spots. And as you study the history and as you go around there and look at even the architecture of the churches, what they would do is they would take the temples that were in place and they would build a Catholic church either on top of it or around it. Mm-hmm. So you can go into some of these beautiful churches there, and there's literally still parts of the original temple inside of the Catholic Church. And so what they began to do is they were tasked with converting everyone to become a Christian, right, to the Catholic religion. So they would go to the tribes and the people that were there, and they would say, okay, like you used to worship the sun, we're just going to call him God now. You can kind of keep doing what you were doing, but instead of sun, you're going to say God. Instead of the moon, you're going to just say Jesus now. And it kind of just became an odd mix of like tribal religion and Catholicism and kind of just blended,
that still exists
blended together. There is, I mean, there are still more so as you get outside of like Lima, as you get outside of the big cities, it's really an odd mix of Catholicism with ancient religions, and you get some weird mixtures there.
Wow. I was reading a book called Church History in Plain Language, and the author is a professor, I think Denver Theological Seminary. It was really, really good, but it opened my eyes to how much that happened throughout church history. Yeah. Where, they were expanding the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. They were doing so in a militant way. Yeah. And then they were adopting the beliefs of that culture and integrating it within. So I always ask myself, being raised in the Catholic Church, where did the idea of idol worship really come from? Like we have statues, and where did this all come from? Well, it came from the Goths. I assumed it came from pagan culture in the Roman era, but they went into that culture, the Gothic culture, and adopted their beliefs. So the same thing happened.
And that's a great way to put it, right? It was a very militant way I mean, honestly, they were there to conquer the country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were there. The figure's out there somewhere of how many tons of gold they took out of these countries.
Right.
Because, again, as you study the history of some place like Cusco, they had gold, but it didn't have a monetary value to them.
Yeah.
Like they just used it because it was pretty. Like it was a beautiful thing to cover stuff with, to use in their architecture. So like the conquistadors came in and there's like buildings with gold all over them. There's one place in Cusco, the main temple, they believe they called it, oh man, I can't think of the name, but it was literally a garden that everything in it was made of solid gold. So it was like a garden with trees and people and animals, like just made out of solid gold.
Wow.
Because it didn't mean anything to them. It was just beautiful. And they used it because of how beautiful and how good it looked. So they were coming in to conquer these countries to take the wealth out of them. But at the same time, they were tasked with taking religion and expanding the kingdom of God. So it was expanding the kingdom, but in a militant way. And, you know.
Did they take a lot of that gold? I would imagine they probably ripped down a ton of the architecture.
They took it all out, and shipped it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm not expecting you to know this. Like what year do you think like Machu Picchu was actually built? Was that?
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
And I've never been
really
there.
cool though. So I've not been to Machu Picchu itself because the times that I went to Cusco, Ari wasn't able to be with me. And so we want to go there together.
Oh, that's cool.
But I've been to,
what a good husband.
Like Cusco is the city that's closest.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, you could spend days in Cusco just going out and seeing, learning about the history and seeing the old architecture. And like I said, you can go inside of these beautiful churches and there's still preserved architecture in there of, you know, the temples and what they had before the conquistadors came in.
Yeah. Wow.
It's really cool.
Wow. I need to go there, Mike.
Come on, let's go.
We need to hit that up too.
Yeah.
But Cusco is very high altitude, right? So,
yeah. It's somewhere around 11,000 feet above sea level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you take for altitude sickness when you're there?
So
I'm setting you up.
You are setting me up. And that's okay. So they have coca leaves there.
Yeah.
And you actually, so in the hotels, this is completely on the up and up, right?
Yeah,
they have hot water and they have coca leaves and you make tea out of it. And it actually alleviates altitude sickness.
Right. It's like the making of cocaine. It's nothing to do with that.
Yeah, no. Because, I mean, if you would look up how to take that and make cocaine out of it.
How in the world did somebody figure that out?
Honestly, I've heard several people say that they believe that it was people that were demon possessed, that's how they came up with it. Because like in your human mind, you have to like microwave it and you like soak it in kerosene and get stuff like it is an absolutely
Who in their right mind would have
way to take this and the little minute stuff that you have to extract out of it and then make cocaine with it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So the coca leaf is not illegal.
Yeah,
it's
like
nothing bad. It's actually used for altitude sickness.
Altitude sickness. Yeah.
Okay. How does that help though?
It is.
I know you wanted to be in medicine whenever you were younger.
Yeah.
Right?
So when you make the tea, or some people will actually just chew on it, it is a natural. It's a natural chemical in the leaves that alleviates that feeling of altitude sickness in your body.
Inflammation or anti-inflammatory?
It is. Well, so altitude is naturally anti-inflammatory, right? And so most of those feelings of altitude sickness come from like a lack of oxygen. Dehydration is a big thing when you're up there. Like you have to drink, an abnormally large amount of water to keep your body hydrated.
Yeah.
So it's all of those effects that your body is feeling. So like you'll get headaches, you'll feel nauseated, just because of the effect that altitude has on your body. Even the pressure, right? Like there's more pressure on your body at those high altitudes than there is like here at sea level.
Yeah. So the coca leaf like helps you absorb the oxygen or?
No. So you still have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, so you still have to drink water. You still like when you get off the plane there, like you'll feel it even walking up like a little incline, like you're out of breath, you're
right,
like, dude.
Right.
So it doesn't take that away, but it takes away the effects that you feel so that you can take care of your body. So like, just because you have coca tea, like you still have to drink a lot of water or you do end up super sick.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
Shifting, just a couple questions. Like, what are you really excited about right now in the missions world? Like, what's really fueling your tank, thinking about and dreaming about?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's a quote that I read the other day, and it said, hold on, I'm going to read it exactly.
Yeah. Oh, you wrote it down.
Yeah,
Nice.
I wrote it down. I know, it said, people are drowning in content, but they're starving for community.
Yes.
And man, I think especially after COVID, after, so many people were isolated for so long, I think people are absolutely starving for community right now. And I think right now is such a great time for us to do exactly what we were talking about. The needs, like needs never go away, right? Like there's always going to be needs. People are always going to need help physically. But I think now more than ever, they're so much more receptive to that, and they're open to that, and they're open to that idea of community and relationship. And like they're kind of starving for that because we were isolated for so long.
Right.
So I think there's so many more opportunities for us to do that now, and for us to be able to reach people in a way that either wasn't available before or people just weren't open to it before.
It almost seems like there was so much disunity in the last couple of years that we all do want to band together.
Yeah.
And, you can't move forward without friends.
Right.
I don't know how anybody does it without friends.
Right. Exactly. And that's a huge problem everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, the effects of that are felt everywhere. I mean, obviously mental health is a big issue right now.
Yeah.
People that
is it the same in the countries that you serve?
It is. Yeah.
Is it worse or similar or?
I mean, honestly,
even
in Peru,
better sometimes.
Like our missionaries there, like Melissa, she'll tell you. I mean, there was a time where her kids didn't leave their apartment for like 6 months.
Oh, that would be horrible.
And that has lasting effects.
And her kids are lively.
Exactly. Like her kids are, they're very,
how do you do that?
Very high energy children, right? But how do you do that? And I don't even think we've fully seen the effects of that on people yet.
Right.
I mean, we still have people, even at our local universities here, like when you talk to them about their concerns for the student population, you still have kids that are taking online classes, like they're staying in their dorms. They're not coming out and engaging like they were before COVID. So I think that is still an ongoing problem. And I think it's something that we have to face head on and, just be willing to admit that it's there and then be willing to find a way to tackle that.
Yeah. I got a call from one of my old youth students, and he's out in the middle of nowhere finishing up school. And, he's in an apartment by himself, taking all of his online classes, and he started having panic attacks. Yeah. He didn't know where they were coming from. Like, dude, do you have any friends? Are you around people? Are you getting out? Like, he's like, no, I stay here all day. Like, let's start there.
Yeah. Like we were never meant to do life alone, right? Like we weren't meant to be isolated.
Right.
So it's interesting because you have kind of these two fronts. You have people that have realized that, and they're like, I need people. I need friends. I need community. And then you have the other side where like that young man that's like, man, like I'm having panic attacks. I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, man, like you have to. Like you've got to get out of your room. You have to come back out into society.
Yeah. There's a third one I'd argue with a person who, and this is going to be blunt, but says, I need community. And they really don't want community. You know, they're like, this place is just an excuse for them to go from church to church. I can't find friends here and nobody likes me. And I had a guy who's like, he said, nobody said hi to me here. And I remember Alan Spiegel told me when somebody says that, say, did you say hi to anybody? So I did. I'm like, hey man, like, it's your first week here. Like, did you say hi to anybody? And I know people said hi to him because, I know the people who are at the doors positioned to say hi. Nobody said hi to me. Yeah. He said, this person passed me. That person happened to have a sight impairment. It's kind of a victim mentality.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really want true relationship.
Right. And what do you think the reason is behind that? What is that? What's the reason behind that? I'm saying I want one thing, but like I actually don't though.
I think there's a number of reasons. I think the first thing is most people aren't really in touch with what they really want. Yeah. And they're told, I should want this and the church should provide this and these people should provide this for me. But they're actually feeling something quite different, or when they come in, like the other guy that I mentioned, he just kind of, he came in and he's like, it was just information without relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everywhere you go, there you are. And you've had a couple of bad experiences, but you might need to change your approach here.
Yeah.
And they just want people to say, oh yeah, I'm going to just take all the information you have and, change everything within the church just because, you said you read a book once, and he doesn't really want that. I think there's a shame that comes alongside of that too. It's a shame inside. Like, I'm not really worthy of relationship sometimes. And it's a preemptive rejection. I've seen that with people.
Yeah.
I've seen that with sometimes in leadership, a leader will reject somebody sometimes just simply because they think that person is talented and they think that person is ultimately going to reject them. If they really knew who I am on the inside as a leader, they're going to reject me. So let me reject them first. Yeah. So I think it's a number of things. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. And that's kind of that like old school leadership mentality, right? Like, I've actually been reading a really cool book about the corporate ladder, right? Because like that's what we know as people. Like you're kind of gunning for the job, ahead of you or on top of you. You're always fighting for that next position. And the whole premise of the book is that we as leaders need to move to like a circular leadership structure where like you're here in this same circle as I am, and like you're just as valuable as I am, and your input is the same as mine. Right. And I think that for a long time we haven't done that, and people have felt like their voice doesn't matter, and they're not important enough to be in those circles.
Yeah. Yeah, think about the servant leadership of Jesus. He actually flipped the corporate ladder. Right. He finds himself on the bottom and all the pressure's on him. He's like, I'm gonna come in and serve. Right. Yeah. And what I'm frustrated about, I think, in leadership is a lot of times people are very attracted to people who have the loudest voice rather than the bended knee. Yeah. And it's like, man, like Jesus came to serve, not be served. Right. I don't know why that exists. I have a couple thoughts on why.
But it just works, right? Yeah. Like the greatest way to lead people is actually to serve them. And people will naturally follow. And of course you have leaders that force people to follow them, right? But like, is that really leadership? Are they really following? Right. The greatest way to lead people is to serve people though.
Right. Yeah. Right. The greatest all is the servant of all.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's good.
It's biblical.
It is. It's almost like Jesus wrote that or something, or modeled it. Yeah. He didn't write anything that I know of, but I mean, he spoke things and it was written, but it's almost like he said that. Yeah. Yeah. That's good, man. That's good. So you're excited about relationship and.
Yeah. I think we have opportunities. Like I said, I think we have opportunities now that necessarily weren't there before COVID, like just keeping with that example, like of food and food distribution. And I think that what we went through in the pandemic, I feel like people are more open to that and they're more receptive to the fact, man, like I need help. Like it doesn't have anything to do with like me not being a good person or like I didn't work hard enough. Like I literally just can't do this right now. Like I cannot provide right now. Yeah. And they're more open to accepting that help and ultimately leads to relationship, right? We're not just there to meet physical needs. We're ultimately there to form relationships. And, how can we help you long term? How can we help you better your life, to better your family, which then ultimately leads to the opportunity to share the gospel with them, and to lead them into that. I think I feel like there's just so much opportunity. People are so open right now, even going into communities, going into those areas, people are so open and receptive right now. Even in areas where we would distribute food, saying like, man, like, can we just pray for you? And, people, I feel like before COVID, there were some people that obviously would, but, a lot of times it was like, nah, like I'm good. No, thank you. I just feel like there's a real openness right now that people have just simply because of what we've went through the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah. And almost that relationship is going to heal, it's going to heal the mental effects we may not have seen, right? But it might, I do believe it's going to heal. Now, Mike, regarding missions in the church and, and everything, like, what have you seen the church get wrong? The missions get wrong regarding the church. Like, what are some burdens on your heart that you're like, man, this needs to shift. We need to change our mentality.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Like we thought we could just come in with all the answers, and it's like, just let us come in, let us take over. We're
Americans.
We're the big American church.
And they're like,
we have all the
we're
answers.
Americans too.
Yeah, that's actually a really funny thing I learned real early on.
Yeah.
Which has nothing to do with what you just asked. But like, we would go to Peru and they would ask where you're from. And I'm like, I'm an American. And finally somebody said to me, they're like, you realize they're Americans too. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I never thought of that. Yeah. So like there literally is a word in Spanish. I'm a United Statesian. And
wow.
They literally have a word for that. Like
United Statesian.
I'm a United Statesian. Yeah. Like they're Americans too, right? So anyway, we thought that like, man, we're the big, church from the United States. We have all the answers. We know what to do. And I think that the shift is happening. And I think it needs some more of like, we're coming in and like, we're just blessed to live in a country with the resources that we have, And so I think it's this idea of us coming in and truly coming alongside of, the big C church in these countries and saying like, how can we resource you? How can we help you? Like, how can we help you reach more people, to reach your communities better? And I think that that's what the push has to be towards. Less of we have the answer, more like you have the answer inside of you already. How can we resource you and help you do that better?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I remember going down the second time we went to Lima, we did the worship mission trip.
Yeah.
And I realized how much more they knew about music than we ever anticipated. We have an individual with perfect pitch and he knows all the music philosophy and all of that stuff. And he's teaching it. And then their team plays and we're like, they're good. They're really good. Right. They are really good musicians.
Yeah.
We don't need to teach them music.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to serve them. They can teach us, and I think that's a beautiful relationship as opposed to, just coming in and feeling like we're the, I don't think we have everything going for us in the church in the United States. And I do just like kind of think back to you saying like, is that good that, they might be looking at us and trying to model? There's so much we can learn from them.
Exactly.
There's so much from like, I want to see, I think the church in Asia hit the United States, maybe not in the same manner. Like I would hate the idea of persecution coming to the United States, but these people are on fire for God.
Yeah. The idea of the underground church, like what they go through just to be able to gather and worship.
Yes.
Like we have no context of that.
Right.
We have no idea what that looks like.
Right. One of my friends told me that a man walks a full day just to hear the gospel in Cambodia. Yeah. He walks a full day. Yeah. Just to sit on a bench and hear the word of God. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, when we would do even on like a pastoral level, like when we would do pastors conferences in Peru, we would do them, out in some of these cities along the Amazon River, and like we would pay for pastors. I mean, they would come days by boat down the Amazon, and then they would sleep in the church. So they would sleep on the pews of the church, and then we would pay for some of the ladies in the church to make food every day. And, I'm thinking like, if we tried to do this in the United States, like if we have to fly more than a few hours, we're like, what in the world? Are you like, you know, they didn't bring in Chick-fil-A for lunch. Like, what are these people doing?
Why did my mind go to the same spot?
Right? Like, we flip out about it. And man, like they have such a desire, and it is all consuming for them to be able to learn more, to be in church, to have that opportunity to gather, to worship. And I feel like some of, just living in the United States, the comforts that we have here, we've lost a little bit of that. Yeah. We've, so to speak, we've lost our first love, and we've forgotten what that's like to be like that.
Yeah. I was just mindful. I'm just being mindful of a lot of the complaints that I received over the pandemic. I was like, you just need to go on a mission trip. I remember we took our son on his first mission trip, and it was like, man, he was complaining. He was acting privileged, honestly, and that's natural. I think every kid goes through a phase like that. I don't want to put him down by any means.
No, not at all. He did fantastic on that trip.
But his eyes opened. His eyes were open.
Yeah,
God used that trip to open his eyes, and he has just been completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different since that trip.
Different.
He's like, I didn't know people lived like this. Like seeing grandparents and parents and kids all live in a small apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
That was like Huge for him.
We're not talking about like a 7 or 8 bedroom house, right? Like, I mean, we're talking what a normal individual family in the United States would live in, having multiple generations all living under the same roof. And yeah, I mean, kids in the United States, like, it's not their fault.
And no furniture.
Yeah.
They have like folding chairs or lawn chairs.
Right.
What are
Lawn
those
chairs.
like those white lawn chairs that we used to have in the 80s as kids?
Yeah,
you know, we
exactly.
broke more than
the
enough.
fabric on them.
You lean back
dry
on
rot
them, it's
after a
falling.
while.
Yeah, that thing is breaking apart.
Yeah.
And
like
kids
kids
they have
here,
those
like,
in their house and they have circles and you sit
Yes.
there and it's just like you feel so welcomed.
you sit there and talk. Like, you actually talk with each other,
Right.
and like the kids are listening.
No
and
phones.
They're
Nobody's
not,
distracted.
Like, exactly. And like, it's not our kids' fault. Like,
Right.
they just don't know that life. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of like, I don't want to downplay what happened in the pandemic here, right? Like, it was tough, but to look at what happened in other countries, and I think to have that mindset, like you're saying, of having been in other countries where like it was nothing here. Like, we could still go to Walmart and buy 2 weeks worth of food and be fine no matter what happened. And sure, we had our own problems here, but man, it was nothing compared to other countries.
Right. We weren't locked in our, apartment with our multi-generational apartment with
where literally you could
time.
not leave, or the military was there being like, get back indoors or we're arresting you.
We're going to arrest you. Yeah. And wow.
Yeah. And I mean, even the churches suffered, right? Because churches weren't even allowed to meet, right? Like, here in the States, we kind of had that little gray area of like churches were still allowed. But then even once it opened, like, I'm going to push on you a little bit here, but like, even once it opened, churches were, so this is in Peru, churches were required to have people show their vaccination card to be at church on Sunday. And the government would actually send out people to check and make sure that everyone there had provided their vaccination card to come into church. So it wasn't even like, okay, we're opening up a little bit now. Like, it was still super regulated, very difficult even for the churches to open back up and be able to just meet and worship again.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Really, really difficult.
Yeah. So how are you going to push on me?
Here's my question to you.
Yeah.
All right. What is your definition of a missionary?
A missionary? I lean toward
whether it's just like a general definition or like the word itself. What does it mean? Where do we get that from?
So Paul's missionary journeys, I don't think he ever used the word missionary in the in the book of Acts or in any of his writings, but we labeled it. He was on a mission. We see. I'm like processing as I'm talking. We see like the food distribution in the early book of Acts. We see Paul's first, second, I think he had 3, potentially 4 missionary journeys, but we labeled it that.
Right.
So I would look at it as an apostolic movement, like going to spread the gospel with the purpose of coming alongside of or starting a new church. Like, that's what missionaries should be doing.
Yeah. And so like, if you get it even simpler, like, I love to just even have a simpler definition, right? Like, so you have a mission and then we put that suffix ARY on the end. And that literally just means related to or connected to.
Yeah.
So I think the vital part of that is to have our mission right, because then as missionaries, like, that just means we're so connected to, we are so related to that mission that that's our entire world.
Yeah.
And so I actually went back. I wasn't supposed to get ready for this, but I did a little bit of homework here, and actually went back and I listened to the video that you did for New Year's.
I love putting you on the spot. It's fun.
I got ready for it. I still did my homework.
He might ask me the question over here.
He might come
Maybe
up.
Over
I got
here.
like 8 pages of notes of what if. But I went back and I listened to your video that you put out for New Year's, and you literally came out and you said, this is our mission as Hill City Church. And you said, like, if you are a church member or if you call Hill City your home, this is what our mission is. And you said that it's to point people to Jesus and their purpose by awakening our city to the goodness of God in the new digital era.
Yeah.
And so you gave us what our mission is, and that's to point people to Jesus and purpose. And then you gave us how to do it.
Yeah.
Is by awakening our city to the goodness of God. And so I was like, Zach just made everybody at Hill City missionaries. Like, you literally gave us our mission. And if
That's
you're
cool.
saying like, if you consider yourself a part of this church, here's our mission, like here's what we are called to do.
Right.
And here's how we have to do it.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, that's really good, Mike.
And
because missions or ministry is who you are where you are.
right.
And I think that our view of the church in the United States is it pulls people back from their responsibility in the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And then we simply relegate, well, my only responsibility in the Great Commission is to go to a foreign land and, serve and preach the gospel once, but then I don't do it at all.
Right.
In my hometown or in my family. And it's just not supposed to be that way.
Well, and it's actually very biblical because it says it's like Jerusalem, right? Judea, Samaria, and the whole world.
Yes.
So like we're very clearly mandated to start in our very community we live in.
Yeah.
And we're to minister in all of those places.
Dude, I was just meditating on the scripture about Philip, the evangelist. Okay. And so Philip is he is serving in a crowd, but he is like working with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Then God takes him to one person, the Ethiopian eunuch. And as he goes and chases down the chariot, preaches the gospel to that one person. Yeah. Then Philip is transported to another area where he is now preaching to the multitudes. Yeah. And it's almost as if God was like, there's a season of faithfulness for you. You need to be around people. You need to learn how this is done. You need to have accountability in your life. Yeah. And then I'm going to check your heart and I'm going to see if you really care about that one. Yeah. The one that there might be a language barrier to, the one that there might be a cultural difference or whatever, and you might be a little bit concerned, but do you care about that one? And then when you care about the one, God opens up doors. I just think people can sometimes focus way too much on, I want to preach in front of a crowd. You're like, are you serious? Dude, you got to love people first.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like even going back to that example of Philip, like I think a way that we've missed it as a church too is our focus has been, here we are in a building, we're the church, come to us. Right. But like Philip went to those places and he chased after the chariot and like he was transported to another area. And I think about like, what does that look like for us as the church to awaken our city? Yeah. Like to awaken is this idea that like you have to go. And like you even said it in that video, you said it starts with you, right? So like you have to be awakened first, but then that idea of awakening someone, like you don't just sit there. Right, it's like waking our kids up for school in the morning, right? Yeah. Like if all I do is sit in the living room, I'd be like, all right, like he's going to wake up soon, Right. Like you have to actually go and do it. And I think that that's part of that Great Commission that I think sometimes we of the church have missed. Right. It's that idea of like, we're just going to sit back and sit here in the church and you're just naturally going to come to us. Right. Whereas that's not like, we have to have that mindset that like, we're going to go. Right. And it might be to a multitude one day, but it literally might be like one person on the street that God calls us to. Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? We're in the supermarket and there's that one person that the Holy Spirit's like, hey, you need to go and talk to them. You need to go and minister to them. Right. And I think that that's what we have to be ready to do. Like just as church members, right? Just to live like, so to speak, a missional life is whether it's a multitude, whether it's one person, we have to be willing to get outside of that. Right. To get outside of the church and to live that way and to be willing to go to people. Right. Like it could even be starting a Bible study in your work, right? Yeah, right. Okay, so I have one person show up to this. Yeah. And then we look at success and you're like, that's not very successful. You have one person show up to a Bible study, pour your life into that person. Yeah. You never know what's going on in that person's life, and you never know how that relationship is going to benefit you, right? But this idea never know the impact of that, right? Of just one person. Yeah. Like you never know the impact of just changing the life of one person. Yep. Yep. We're reading that book, In the Way, and it laid out like if your church grows by 10,000 people a year, that's successful, right? But if you lead one person to Christ, who leads one person to Christ, you disciple one person who disciples, who disciples, who disciples. Right. Within 18 years, we reached the world, and we're still trying to grow by 10,000 people a year over here. It's like 300,000 people versus the entire world within like just the number of 20 years, 30 years. Yeah. I mean, it's like we talked about Paul and his missionary journeys, right? Like he was led to places, like he was shipwrecked just to minister to one person. Right. But then that one person had an effect upon the whole area. And like we never know
Yeah.
what those relationships, like what that one person, we never know the effect of that.
Yeah.
But so many times we think, right, like I have to have 500 people that I'm talking to,
Right.
or 1,000 people, or 1,000,000, or whatever.
Right. Right.
And really, it's just like the Bible says, like you leave the 99 to go after the one.
Right.
Like that one person is so important.
Did you ever hear the story of the shoemaker who poured his life into D.L. Moody?
I think you've told me that before.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
right.
powerful.
Like, because it was just him changing the life of one person.
Yeah.
But then
D.L. Moody was a troubled kid.
Yeah.
And he was doing Sunday school. So he invited him in and, he's like, I'm going to give you a job and I'm going to preach the gospel to you, much like my uncle did to me.
Yeah.
I was working with him, sweeping the floors, and he would just kind of share the Bible with me,
Yeah.
But this man pours his life into D.L. Moody, and D.L. Moody gives his life to Christ. And then he leads somebody to Christ who leads Billy Sunday to Christ, who leads Billy Graham to Christ, and then Billy Graham leads,
millions.
Like the impact of just loving and caring and being faithful to one.
Yep.
We miss that, don't we, man?
Yeah.
Like sometimes we miss that.
And I think it's because we don't see, like we can't see with our physical eyes that increase, right? I mean, look, the financial world has figured it out, right? They talk about compound interest all the time.
Exactly it.
It's like 1 becomes 2, but then it begins to increase and expand incrementally. But like we can't see that with our eyes. Like we can't always see, right? Like the Bible says, like some plant, like some water, some actually get to harvest. And so we think if we're just the planter or if we're just watering, like our natural tendency is to be like, well, man, like that wasn't successful. Like I'm not a success. And in the reality of it, like someone told me this a long time ago when I was first starting out in all this, and it's always stuck with me. They said, like, we have no idea the amount of people that will be in heaven just because like we planted a seed or we watered it. And we can't see that with our natural eyes, but we have to be kind of willing to see that with our spiritual eyes of the effect that just that one encounter can have on all of eternity.
Right. Like you change a generation of people who come after, like if you reach a father for Christ, the statistics are that 90+% of the family like will come to Christ. Yeah. There's a 90% chance that the entire family would come to Christ. That's what it is.
Or like, remember Pastor Josue in Peru, remember his whole thing was kids, right? He's like, if we can get the kids to come to church, like we know that we can eventually get to talk to the parents. Yeah. I mean, remember he pulled up with that little taxi the one time. I mean, there's like...
It was like a clown car.
There's like 47 kids in there.
Right? I was telling Pastor Larry about that the other day. I was like, no, you're really going to like, because we were talking about, some different dream ideas of maybe taking some things to Tingo Maria. And I was like, no, you're going to like this guy. He got 15 kids in a car this big. And then he just kept on rounding them up and getting them to VBS.
Going. Right. But that's the whole idea. Like you reach a kid, like you worry about that one kid, that one life, and it has a ripple effect upon their family, their community, on everything.
How are Josue and Gladys doing?
They're good. Actually, Melissa and Samuel keep in touch with them. Again, they struggled through COVID, but they did really well. Like, man, they were doing stuff online. Like, I know you even saw that. Like every morning,
I would join their prayer meeting, and I'm like, I don't understand a word, but I'm with you, man. You're passionate. I'm feeling it, baby.
They're so passionate, and they're such great pastors, man. Like, they just have that fantastic heart to do that. So, they're still doing great, man. They made it through. They made it well, and they're doing good.
It is kind of funny to watch just the different culture, and it's so different. You know what I mean? Like he set up like a news station almost for his prayer meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, oh, bless them, man. Yeah, they're just unbelievable people.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
But it's just it's such a great culture, though.
It really is, and it really is.
Like you said, to get people to experience a culture different than their own.
Yeah.
It's so eye-opening.
How do you say I'm thirsty in Spanish? What do you say? I can't remember.
I make it
I
up.
kept on saying that. Over and over. Yeah. When I was playing soccer with the kids, I was just like pretending like I was like gas or whatever. And like they just immediately would like run and grab something. You know, and you're like, don't drink that. Your stomach can't handle it. You're not used to that yet.
You got to be a little careful. Yeah. Like when you said you were caliente.
Yeah.
Which doesn't
Peru,
mean
it means sexy.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're temperature hot.
It does in other parts.
Exactly.
So it's like,
you
just not there. Yeah. Well, I was telling an old lady too. That's even better.
Right.
The look that she gave me, I'll never forget.
They're very forgiving people also.
Yeah.
They appreciate
she pulled
you
her
trying.
head back. She was like, what are you saying right now?
Yeah. My guy's a gringo.
Yeah, she looked like that. You remember that one meme of the one little child looking at a woman like that?
Oh,
you remember that? That's exactly the look.
That's how she looked at you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was except for it was an old lady.
Yeah,
it was an old lady. It's fun, man. It's fun. Is there anything else that you're really focused on this year that you wanted to get out?
No, I think it just, like just in our context as Hill City, man, like I just keep going back to that. Like in like as a church member of Hill City, getting to be here on staff with you, like that mission of Hill City, like to awaken our city and like even specifically where we are, right? Like here in Carlinton, I mean, this is the community where our land is. Mm-hmm. This is where we're going to be. Like this is our home, Carnegie, Crafton, Robinson. Mm-hmm. Man, how do we awaken those areas to the goodness of God?
Right.
How do we do that? And like, that's just the focus of like where I'm thinking, where I'm praying, what I'm thinking, like, man, how do we do this? Right. Because there's a way there, like there's a key to those communities. And I think that we have to be, led by the Lord in that. A lot of what you're doing, right? Like just talking to the magistrates and talking to the police department, like, man, what are the problems here? What can we as a local church, how do we just come in and help?
Yeah.
How do we be a part of what you're already trying to do?
And that's been awakening for me. I had no clue, that there's not very good accountability for teenagers in law enforcement right now. Drug dealers are using teenagers in our area because they know teenagers are going to get a slap on the hand, but they can't really do much more with them.
Right.
And those kids are right down the street from us.
Yeah.
Getting used.
Literally right down the street.
And mental health facilities have shut down as well. And
at a time when it's needed the most.
It's needed the most.
And where are they?
Yeah, we have real issues and we can't get anybody the help that they need in our area. It's just, it's really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And addiction. I think that's like, man, I think as we go through that, like, I think that's where our focus needs to be, mm-hmm. right? Like, I think that as the Lord shows us those opportunities, those areas of need, that's what our mission becomes, is how do we come alongside of them? How do we meet those needs, and how do we show those people like, man, there's a Savior, like there is a God that loves you and wants to have a relationship with you. And then slowly we begin to awaken the city and, it's not just a guy sweeping a floor, right? It's
right.
Help put a man on the moon. And it's not just I went and served or I went and did one thing. I'm helping awaken our city and our area to the goodness of God.
Yeah. 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 That's awesome, Mike. Appreciate you so much, man. Appreciate what you've done around the world. Appreciate what you've done, locally. I think tapping into pastors and getting food and building those relationships with Bobby and, like all over the place with, in Rochester and in Coriopolis, the work that you've been able to do there. How many hundreds of thousands of pounds of food did you end up delivering?
Since the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're well over 750,000 pounds worth of food.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is so
and
cool.
So we've sort of began to shift our focus a little bit because I think that we've talked about this a little bit internally. Like, I think it's hard for people to figure out what that means. Like, mm-hmm. if you told me if you were like 750,000 pounds of food, I don't know, like mm-hmm. how much is that? How big is that?
Yeah.
So we've actually tried to begin to figure out like actually how many individuals or how many families we're able to impact.
Wow.
And how many
have you been able to figure that out?
Year. Yeah. So, and some of it's based on estimation, right? Like, of course, how many pounds of food we're able to get out to people.
Yeah.
So like last year, we were able to provide almost 15,000 individuals with a day's worth of food.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the latest thing we're just working on. Because like the average person eats, I think it's like 5 pounds of food a day. Yeah. And so we wanted to figure out like how many actual individual people did we impact and have a potential eternal impact.
What was that number again?
Almost 15,000.
15,000.
Yeah.
Wow. And how many years?
Just last year. That was just last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think it was for the years prior too?
Oh, so the years prior was interesting because that's like in the pandemic, right? I mean, people were so open to receiving food. And it's interesting because with the economy, with inflation, like the numbers of people that we're seeing need help are actually beginning to approach the same numbers as the middle of the pandemic.
Really?
Yeah. So coming out of the pandemic, right, everyone was like, man, like we're coming back. the
What's that
economy
attributed to?
the economy, inflation.
Yeah.
So you had those effects of COVID on people with jobs, with losing jobs, with how the economy was. And then we go right into this time of inflation, gas prices. Like, I mean, if you just go to the grocery store, right? I mean, like what, $100 bought you before, like you're coming out with like 2 eggs and a can of pop.
Right.
So you
at Aldi.
At Aldi.
You're like, oh man.
Right.
I got to shove 2 quarters in here now? It's for accountability. They're not even making money off of this.
Right. So you have all these factors that are now we're seeing those numbers beginning to approach the same numbers that we saw in the middle of the pandemic.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of government help during that time too.
There was.
And that's all stripped away.
That's all done. So at this point, everything that we do is either just through private donations where we're able to purchase food, or if we have food donated, all the big government programs for that have all finished.
Wow. So these people who are hungry in our area, what do they eat if they cannot get food?
So it's interesting. So a lot of these areas, they call them a food desert. And then there's this idea of food insecurity as well. So it's not that they're literally starving to death. It's that there's 2 different things. One is that they have to begin to make decisions around what they're going to pay, like what bills they're going to pay, and then food enters into that. So like, for instance, like we're in the middle of winter here, right? Like we just had, did they call it a polar vortex this year?
I don't know think if so. They call,
I don't know. Maybe we didn't reach that level this year, but right. So we had that terrible cold snap, right? So gas bills, right? So all of that is more expensive. So people have to begin to make the decisions of like, do I pay my gas bill? Do I pay my electric bill? If I do, then we have less money to spend on food. So then food is the natural place where like, man, we can probably get by. Like we could buy more ramen noodles and live off of that. So they begin to make decisions of food and how they take away from that budget to pay other things.
Right.
The other idea is the idea of a food desert, which is there is a great lack of nutritious food.
Right. That's the issue.
So food desert and food insecurity are not just not having food, but it's what type of food do you have.
The cheapest foods out there are the ones that are worst for you.
Absolutely.
So as you were saying, like ramen noodles, and then you have blood pressure issues. You have to be on medication.
Yeah, like you can go and still buy a bag of chips much cheaper than you can buy a bag of apples.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of like when we were bachelors. I ate cereal. Every once in a while I'd get chicken. I'd get eggs and chips.
Or like if you were fancy, you would make ramen noodles and put chicken in it, right? Like that was like a gourmet meal.
That was a great idea. Yeah, I don't know how I didn't think of that.
It was a gourmet meal. So it's both of those ideas of not having access to healthy food or having to buy less food to pay other household bills.
Yeah.
I mean, rent, utilities, all of that.
Yeah. I didn't mean to make light of that, by the way, by the bachelor thing. I just remember that is what I ate.
That was life for us. But sadly,
I was that poor.
Life of a bachelor.
I had no way of paying for food. So what am I going to get?
And so
I get
take that
the cheapest
now
stuff
and multiply that across your whole family.
And
they're having to make those decisions.
Oh, man.
So a lot of times people will ask us like, oh, so you're giving food to people that don't have any food. And I'll be like, well, no, that might be the case. But maybe we're giving nutritious food to a family that couldn't afford to give their kids nutritious food.
Right.
Or maybe we're giving food to a family where they can say, hey, like we can actually pay our whole gas bill this month and not have to figure out how to catch up on it next month.
Right.
Or they're able to stay current on their rent and not have to like, man, we'll just deal with the landlord next month, right? So we're able to provide food that is putting families in a better situation where you start talking about like mental health and things like that, where we can actually affect all of those things by providing families with good, nutritious food on a regular basis.
Right. And this will tie together. But when I was talking with one of the magistrates, he was saying that the homelessness issue in Pittsburgh has everything to do with the mental health issue in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
All the facilities getting shut down have forced people onto the streets. And he's like, now we have to deal with it. And we don't have the tools to deal with it. Right. And so a lot of people, I think there's a mindset out there that, hey, when I give people food, it's just, they're lazy. They don't want to work. That's not the case.
No.
It's not the case. Of course, there are going to always be people who take advantage of systems like this.
Yeah, they'll take advantage of it no matter what.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's not the majority of people.
It's not the majority of people. And here's the really cool way to look at it also is if we look at it through a spiritual lens, right? Food and humanitarian aid is just simply a vehicle to get the gospel to people.
Right.
So if we look at it that way, I don't want to say who cares, but like, let's say you, I mean, just being honest,
really
like,
true, though,
let's say we have a food line and we have people that we're giving food out to. Let's say there's an individual in there that maybe doesn't necessarily need the food. But they come through, they get connected to a local church, they get connected to a local pastor, they get prayed for. So maybe even through their dishonesty, there's still a spiritual impact there that we're able to have because the humanitarian aid and the food is not like the end all goal, right? Ultimately, them coming to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and having a relationship, having a local church that they're tied into, that community, that is the end goal. So like, I don't want to say that I don't care if they're dishonest about that, but like, that's just a means to an end. Like, yes, we're meeting people's needs. Yes, we care and love about people. Like, I don't think any family should ever have to deal with like, do we stay in our apartment this month or do we have food to eat? Like, I can't even imagine having to make that decision.
Right.
So yes, we care and we love about those people, but ultimately we want so much more for them.
Right.
And that is the end goal, is to get them tied into those pastors, local churches, and to have that be the end goal.
Yeah. Well, it's so biblical. I'm thinking about the prodigal son, and I would argue that both of them are the prodigal sons. It's the prodigal sons because, one was highly religious and, was like, I did everything right.
Right.
And, so Jesus was talking about too, but the other one, he was eating what the pigs ate. And then he remembered the goodness of his father.
Yeah.
He didn't have to eat that. And his father threw a feast for him whenever he came.
Exactly.
The other picture of that I had was I think about the Roman, the centurion, who had great faith, right? He probably wasn't there because he was like, oh yeah, I really want to hear the gospel. He's probably there watching Jesus, making sure that he isn't like creating like an usurped authority.
Right, creating an uproar.
And so then he hears the gospel. He wasn't there probably for the greatest intentions. He hears the gospel and he responds with great faith. And Jesus calls him out and he's remembered forever because of it.
Right, exactly. So he's there for a different reason, but he's impacted eternally and he's impacted spiritually.
Right.
So that's really what we're going after.
So let's push past the, so-and-so is going to take advantage of this.
Yeah. Like, honestly, no matter what we do, we could set up the greatest systems and processes. There will still be people that take advantage of it.
Yes.
So, is it really even worth our time to do that?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We do a good job thinking that stuff through. Man, it's an honor to work with you, Mike. It's an honor to have done trips with you and all the missions work and supported, your dream. I look forward to many more years of that. And I'm really proud of you, man.
Yeah.
Keep
thanks,
going.
Man.
Keep doing your thing.
It's great. We love it here. We're so glad to be a part of this. And man, just to get to do what we do, I think it's such a great honor, and to be able to go and, like, this is something that I really believe in my heart is like, it's not just Ariane and I that do this, right? Like, we're just one small part. I mean, if it wasn't everybody being involved, if it wasn't pastors like yourself and people that, love and support us, like, it's really all of us doing this work together. And, like, when those people are impacted in Peru, like, you as a pastor and other pastors are just as much a part of that as we are. Like, we're just doing the part of it that we're called to do.
Right.
But, like, it's the body of Christ, right? Like, everyone has a part to play in that, and everyone is a part of that impact.
Well, if we can keep that mentality.
Yeah.
If we can keep that mentality, we've got to have friends. And that's what's really good about what you're doing too, because it's a uniting work. It's a, hey, Pastor Wayne and, Pastor Bobby and, all these people that we mentioned, but like,
it's the big C church.
We're coming together and doing something, not promoting our church, but promoting Jesus.
Exactly.
Doing the works of Jesus on the earth together.
Yes.
Like he intended us to be.
Right. Because we can reach so many more people like that. Right. Like, if we can all come together for that, and if we can keep the kingdom of God in mind and the big C church, we can reach and expand so much more than we ever could by ourselves.
Yep. So we mentioned Mission Comida.
Yeah.
This is like the announcement. Okay. You'll probably get it out there before this airs. I hope you do. I hope you do. I kind of feel bad about it, but I'm like, I'm glad.
Yeah, it's all right. Push it. It's okay.
Hey, that's what I do. I'm going to push you faster. Let's go, Mike. Let's go. Where can people find out about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can just go on our website, themissionco.org, and we're on our socials. We're on Facebook and Instagram and all that fun stuff. And man, you can read about what we do. You can be a part of it. I think that's the biggest part. Like, we don't want people just to read and just, oh, yeah, that's it. Like, man, I want people to come and be a part of it, right? Like, man, if you can see it, if you can be a part of it, like, I mean, like when you came to Peru with us for the first time, like, I can explain that as much as I want. You can read about it all you want, but until you actually go and you're actually a part of it, like there's nothing like that, right?
So I'd agree.
Man, like I think
you kept on saying you got to go to Tingo. I got to get you to Tingo, and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Now I can't wait to get back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And I think that that's the idea is, man, like I want people to come and be a part of it. I want them to see what we're doing. I want them to physically be a part of it, because that will change you and that will impact you in a way that just reading or seeing it, never would.
Yeah, we got to get there, man. We got to get people there. So. It's great work. Thanks for all you do,
man.
Mike.
Yeah.
This was awesome, man. I had a good time with you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for everything, man.
Yeah.